Well, today it's all about topiary, and I'm going to go through some different ways that you can establish topiary or buy topiary or create topiary. But first, I just want you to know that my studio outside is just an absolute mess. This is very behind the scenes QVC because Stuart and I did 3 QVC segments in one day. One was at 1 o'clock in the morning, the other one was at 6 o'clock in the morning, and the other one, last one was at 3 a.m. And anyhow, we were shuffling things back and forth, so this is all kind of chaotic in here, but I thought you'd kind of get a kick out of that because this is where, I don't do all of them, but I do a number of my QVC things. Okay, so today is about topiary, and what I am going to address and describe is more how to get started in topiary. And if you are interested in topiary, then you might, this is a little mini commercial, you might want to get one of my books because I do describe in here care and maintenance of topiary, how you create them, what plants make for good topiary, how I use them, and stage them at my house. So that's just a little heads up that, let me see what I dropped, Stuart. Oh, this is very fortuitous, because if you get one of my books, I think I have told you that I will send you a book plate, and I'll also sign it, and so this is the book plate that you get. So excuse me for, I think I said yesterday I have the dropsies. I think I have the dropsies again today, and Stuart will probably go, oh Nellie. Last week it was tickled pink, and this week it was, oh Nellie. And I said, Stuart, how old are you? He comes up with these expressions that people of my age and older typically use. So I don't know, are you channeling your past, your grandmother or something? Yeah, it wouldn't be a shooting day if I weren't making fun of Stuart. So let's talk about what kind of plants make for good topiary. And by the way, I've kind of got topiary on the brain. In general, I always have topiary on the brain, but in particular now, because I'm also writing an article for, I think it's the April or May issue of Garden Gate magazine on topiary. So that said, that's all the preliminaries out of the way. How do you make topiary? Well, number one, you can buy topiary already made, and I have done that, and especially when I want really large specimens, huge boxwood topiaries like the ones that are out in my yard, in my landscape. I have created them, but a lot of them I've also bought in that form. They can be expensive, yes, but to me it's an investment piece, just like an investment piece of your wardrobe. I consider it to be part of my landscaping wardrobe because it makes such a difference and is one of the main signature touches that I employ in my own garden. So you can get them pre-made. You can look at independent nurseries. Sometimes you'll find them at garden centers. I sometimes will travel a distance to find one, or if you know someone who is a landscape architect or a landscaper, they may have access to different sources that you don't, so you can always ask them to be on the lookout for you. So that is one place where you can find really large specimens. The next place is just, you can buy some pre-made from those same locations, garden centers, nurseries. I find them at Trader Joe's periodically, Whole Foods. Obviously, some of my better independent nurseries will carry them, sometimes florists. And those are typically going to be tabletop varieties. So they may be something like this, if you kind of move with me. I got this topiary, which is basically just a wreath form with plain old hedera or ivy along the wreath, the metal wreath form. I got this at Trader Joe's over the holidays. I got 2 of them. They are still doing just fine. They were very inexpensive at about, $10 to $12, and I love them, and I love them in 2s because they're great symmetry on your buffet, on your mantle, or maybe your dining table outdoors. So that's another way you can get them. Very obviously, you could also save, let's see if we can do a close-up here, Stuart. You could save the metal ring. Can you see that at all? Okay, the metal ring, which I have done many a time. If the plant dies, which they sometimes do, I save the metal ring, and then I can just buy a pot of ivy, and I can, with long tendrils, I can wind it around, and I've created my own ivy topiary. Typically, you'll find that around the holidays like Valentine's Day or Mother's Day or Easter or Christmas, if you're going to find them inexpensively at local sources like Home Depot or Trader Joe's, that's when you're going to find them, is around the holidays typically. So it's a good time to look for them. But obviously you can make them at almost any time of year. Now a few other types of plants that lend themselves to this instant topiary by training something around the form are things like angel vine, or also called wire vine, or muhlenbeckia. You could use something really that you could easily find, like Vinca major, or any kind of ivy, or Asian jasmine. Anything like that that has long tendrils you can find to wind around this. A lot of times you'll also find things like jasmine, or even, I've even seen miniature roses in some ways used this way. So just don't be confined to any one type of material. If it has long branches, long canes, then you probably can make a circular form like this very, very, very easily. And I've often been intrigued about the prospect of maybe doing one that was really huge, a real huge living wreath, maybe around the holidays or something. So that is one form, and probably the easiest form is to train it over a shape. Now obviously there are different kinds of shape you can train them over. You can make your own with wire hangers. Lots of people do that. It's very easy to make a heart shape. You can even make global spherical shapes. One of my favorite things is probably this eggshell shape. This is one of the things that's in my QVC collection. This is an egg-shaped, I think of it as an obelisk or a tutor, and it's just a plant form, and this demonstrates for you what it looks like when you just take an ivy, stick a form into it, and then you start winding and training the tendrils around the form. I'm not sure, I think these might be all sold out, but you might check my QVC line. These are really beautiful, and the nice thing about some of these more elevated, fancy wire forms is that they look beautiful regardless of whether or not they have any kind of plant material growing on them, because they're just inherently beautiful. And then I've got it sitting in one of my smaller Kobo baskets. So that is another way, that's another way that you can do it. Probably one of my favorite ways, and ones that I think you guys have told me that you do a lot of, and that leads me to my question of the day. First of all, do you guys do topiary? And maybe was some of it inspired by this vlog, but also if you do topiary, how do you start them? Do you start them with a wire form like that, which might be one of the easiest ways, excuse me, or do you do this type of topiary creation? So one of my favorite things to do, and this is, I love this because it's just really thrifty and frugal and kind of cheap, and that is I will look at the end of the year or even the beginning of the season for 1 gallon plants. They could be larger than that. They could be 3 gallon, 5 gallon. But they're not symmetrical. They've got kind of a wonky shape. They may not be full and fleshed out. They're usually disregarded by other people who don't see their topiary potential. And oftentimes at the end of the season, they will be on sale. And I believe this is how I created this topiary, which definitely needs some trimming. But what I looked for, and this is just a typical boxwood, you could look for euonymus, you could look for really any type of shrub, privet. This one, what I look for is just something that has a strong central vertical stem. And this definitely had that, and then I could shape it accordingly and have it grow up and into place. And I have done this with junipers, I have done this with all sorts of evergreens, but you basically just get a 1 gallon plant from the nursery. And by the way, Stuart, I think let's put up a link to the topiary playlist, because there's a playlist of all of my past vlogs where I show how to shape them and how to transform just a shrub into a topiary. So that content has already been created, but that's another way. Again, you can look for different forms. For example, this is kind of a classic form that you might see at in your nurseries, and that's just this very tall, pointed, conical shape. A lot of times it will be an arbor vitae, it'll be some kind of evergreen. This is a lemon cypress that we just love. That in my zone can be kind of temperamental. It doesn't really like our heat, but nevertheless, for periods of time, I will grow them. This was actually a start that my friend Monica cultivated and raised to maturity. She can still take cuttings off of this, and she has done that. Stuart, I'm going to go over here and shut this. We've got a little bit of a breeze today, you guys. The weather has been so wacky. That's the door that goes out. Let's give them a little peek into the out of doors. That goes out into the garden. But this is a traditional form that you can find just about anywhere. And a lot of times you will see them and they have the hint of this shape. They have made, sometimes they'll be very tightly clipped, but most of the time they're a little bit fluffy and they don't have the strong architectural form that I at least so much look for in a topiary. So in that case, then you get them and you clip them and they look great in pots, they look great in the ground, they are often very inexpensive, and it's a fun thing to do. In the Southern Living plant collection, I like to use pancake arborvitaes. I also like to use their fire chief arborvitaes. There's a lot of different kinds of evergreens that you can use. So again, don't be confined to any one type of plant material. Just let your imagination go wild and just look for potential. You can see here that I've got some other tiny little boxwoods. This is a start. This one was a case of being observant. So when I trim my boxwood in the spring, sometimes pieces fall to the earth, particularly if it's in an area that stays wet and kind of soggy, and it will root in place, and then I identify it and I dig it up and I turn it into a small starter topiary. But you can also obviously take cuttings, and in the topiary playlist, I believe there is one where Monica shows us how to take cuttings and transform them into topiary. So definitely you will want to reference that and check those out. I've talked about this form of topiary acquisition many times, and it may be, each thing is my favorite, but this might really be my favorite because it is just turning something, nothing into something. This is a cherry laurel that I dug up from the yard. The birds planted it. I didn't even know what it was originally when it came up. I just noticed that it had that telltale strong leader or strong central stem that was rather straight and that I could train with just a little post, a little dowel here. And so I did that. And this one you can see, I don't know, Stuart, can you tell that this is loosely starting to acquire a double ball form? I have played with the idea of just making it be a single ball form, but I think over time I am going to let it grow into a double ball form. Now it is starting to put on new growth, and I anticipate by the end of the season that it will be much thicker and much fuller. Now Stuart, if we can do an up close, let me see if we can get a visual on this. Now the reason that you prune topiary very frequently, especially during the growing season, is because when you trim it, it forces out interior growth. So can you see that, Stuart? That there's a little bud there right at the intersection of the stem and the leaf. You can see right there. There's also one there at the top. And what that will do is it will increase the thickness, the density, and the bushiness of the shape that I am establishing by cutting off the terminal ends. And again, I'm not going to go into that in great detail, but it's something that's in my book, and it's also in some of the previous segments that we have done, previous vlogs that we have done. I've got 2 of these. I've also seen some candidates out in my yard, and it's funny, you guys, because this is proven to be one of my favorite plants to use as topiary, partly because it's just free and I just dug it up, but also because what I love about it is it's got the kind of glossy foliage that I like, but the leaf form is a little bit larger, and it makes a wonderful size and textural contrast to my other topiaries, like my boxwood and like this compacta myrtle. So they create a great synergy, and I love the way they look. Plus it has that kind of glossy foliage. So again, be observant, be open-minded about anything you see growing in your garden. I have done many before where I've dug up little trees, little conifers, and made miniature Christmas trees. It's such a fun thing to do with your kiddos, but also it's a way to get a very elevated, what I sometimes believe we think of as a sophisticated way to garden with these beautiful topiaries, but it does not have to be. You can find all sorts of plant material in your yard or in a friend's yard. I think we have that sometimes misconception that it's really expensive, because you can't pick up a high-end shelter magazine, whether it's Veranda, Architectural Digest, I don't care what kind of shelter magazine it is, Domino, any of them, without seeing topiary inside, used in the interior. And I think that's sometimes why we think they're expensive. Now, while you can create them very inexpensively, you can also spend some money on them. And where I invest my money in topiary is typically in compacta dwarf myrtles, or myrtle communis, whatever it is, however you pronounce it. And these I have found in a number of different places, but typically I have to find these and source them at like someplace in Dallas, or there's a wonderful place in New York City called New York Topiary. And then typically when I'm getting them mail order, I buy them from a store up in Michigan from my friend Angie called Passiflora Kalamazoo, and that's where some of these have come from. I also have my friend Monica who can create a start out of any type of cutting, and because I don't have a greenhouse, she will start cuttings from me from these myrtles, and I have talked about them before. This is a little bit different shape. Here is the classic and probably my favorite shape, which is just the lollipop shape, which is a globe on a straight standard form. These are also, by the way, the nomenclature is a little bit different, and these are also called, you might see rose on standard, where there'll be a rose that's been topiaried on a strong trunk. That is called a standard. Another form that I'm interested in that I've been working on, and this one definitely is ready to go out in the sun because the growth is starting to get kind of leggy, but I'm also really interested in creating myrtles out of this tall, very slender conical form. I've done them with rosemary, I've done them with different kind of herbs, and these are just, you know, even though we think of maybe topiary as an indoor plant, particularly tabletop topiary, say that 3 times fast. Oh, Nellie. Oh, Nellie Stewart, say that 3 times fast. They really want to be outside. Even the myrtles, they really want to be outside, and they can suffer when you bring them indoors with the lower humidity and the dry air. So if you are going to lose a topiary, that is a high risk period, is in the winter time when they just have trouble adapting. And I just consider that as the cost of doing business, the cost of growing topiary, that I will lose a number of them during the winter, but I always have enough to sustain me into the growing season. And I've got some smaller ones here that are being trained into interesting shapes. This one over here is a really fun one, and I don't know why, but I think of it as my Pan Topiary. This is that compacta myrtle, and I think of it as a Pan Topiary because this reminded me of what is on a pirate ship. The sailing infrastructure of the sail of a pirate ship. And so I just trained some of these to go lateral, and I trained these along just some really thin supports, stakes that I got that actually probably came from some of my, I hardly ever throw away anything that still has utility, and these probably came from some small orchids that I have had in the past. So this is kind of an unusual shaped one. And then this one here, you can see, is kind of an ugly teenager, and it is growing up hopefully to be a beautiful adult. And this one I just trained for that Garden Gate magazine article that I am doing to show how you get it started. It was growing laterally, and then I just trained it up a post. Now, some of the things that you might need, and Stuart, let's put all these links in the description below. We'll put, sometimes depending on what form you are seeing it on, whether it's your phone, your laptop, your iPad, you may or may not see the links above, but I always put them below in the description box, and also on my Instagram account in stories, we supply the link, and if you can't find it, just shoot us a comment and we definitely will provide you the link. But some of the starter things that I like to have on hand when I start working with topiary are, number one, obviously some kind of plant material, and it lets your imagination go crazy. I like to have some really good snips, and I have used different kinds over the years. Sometimes I just use basic scissors, but these are probably my favorite ones. These are Joyce Chen. I like them because they have just such fine tips that you can do really detailed work and detailed cutting. And I'll put a link to these. You can get these off of Amazon. I really like these. I also typically have, I like these little tiny whisk brooms, and I will keep these in my garden truck, or I've got one in my kitchen so I can kind of clean up the snips that fall all over the place. And then this time of year, I find this absolutely indispensable. And that is some kind, and you could use Miracle Grow or some other kind of liquid fertilizer, but I like to use the Espoma products, or I'm also trying another organic liquid fertilizer. And at a very, very weak strength, right now I am starting to fertilize my topiary so that they will start putting out growth that I can start trimming into shape. I'm not going to aggressively feed them right now because we've still got a lot of winter left, but I do want them to start putting on growth along with the longer days, because even though they're indoors, there's more sunlight coming in as the days increase. So I'm doing that with pretty much all of my topiaries, particularly my indoor topiaries right now. So that's what I like to have on hand. Also, one thing that I have found is it's just pretty much easier, not necessarily always attractive when you're not using them to style something, but just more as a hobby. I like having trays that you can set them in. I got these plastic faux terracotta trays. I got these off of Amazon, and they're really good because then to keep them watered, I can just pour water into the tray and it hydrates them from the bottom up. And the other thing that it does is start encouraging the growth of that wonderful mossy patina that I like so much. So, so that's good. The other thing is myrtle topiary, unlike most plants, they don't mind standing in water. So I don't worry too much about them getting harmed by sitting in water for a while. You can hardly overwater these dwarf compacta myrtles. You can, however, really underwater them. And once they've been underwatered or they have suffered, they're just kind of a goner, and they can be a little bit temperamental that way. If you're not already following my friend Loy on Instagram, he lives in Maryland and in Maine, and he has some fabulous huge myrtle topiary, and that's what I'm going for this year. In my motivation to look a little less cluttered, I'm going for fewer topiary but much larger topiary, and that's been kind of fun because what I've done is take some of my smaller ones and plant them all together so that it will create one large form. So there's just a little bit of a kind of an overview of topiary, not a lot of intense detail on trimming, but hopefully it will help encourage you to start your own topiary and just be creative, because boy, it will really get your creative juices going. So Stuart, have I forgotten anything? So again, don't forget to answer the question of the day below. Do you do topiary? What kind of plant material do you like to use? And let me know your thoughts on that. So there you go, topiary talk for today. Well, here's your fashion epilogue for today. It's kind of a fun one, a little bit different. I'm shaking it up a little bit. So it's about 59 out, Stuart, I think, and that's the high for today. Right now it's not quite that warm. So it's all about layering, putting on one layer over another so you can kind of discard what is getting a little too warm throughout the day. So my top is a poncho that I got. I can't remember where I got it. It was from a friend of mine who was doing a clothing line that you sell out of your house. And I bought it at that, and I really like it because it's a great shawl. It's good to kind of, you know, if you're just sitting in front of the fireplace, it's got kind of a blanket quality. So I really like that, but I anticipate that later today it's going to get too warm for that. So I just have a sweater underneath this. I think you saw earlier in the week. This is thrifted from Goodwill. It's a Banana Republic sweater, and I like it. It's kind of part shrug, part cardigan. Now this is kind of a fun thing. I love graphic tees. I think Stuart kind of does too. And 99% of my graphic tees I get at Goodwill or thrifted, but a friend of mine called and said that she was at Old Navy and that they had a whole bunch of really fun graphic tees that are kind of Earth Day related, things like that. So I got this one there, Keep It Wild. My hubs really liked this one, and mostly I like them because these are a good shape. So like I say, I hadn't been in Old Navy in forever and a day, but I went in there and I actually bought several of them. They were like $6 or something, and they're 100% cotton. So they're great for layering, and if you really like graphic tees that you can wear under cardigans and blazers or by themselves, they're a fun thing. So uncharacteristically, I stocked up on a number of them, and they did not come thrifted. So this is a really fun thing for you guys today. So there's a little story behind this bracelet in particular. So, and you can see I've got other ones along with it. So I was at the farmer's market in Aspen, Colorado years ago, and there was a woman there who was so uber and effortlessly chic. I just loved her whole look, and she was selling jewelry, and her jewelry was beautiful, but what I really loved was the bracelet she had on, and it looked just like this. And I said, well, I love your stuff. I picked out a couple of pieces, and I said, but I really would love to buy your bracelet. I said, is that a piece that she made? And here is the surprise that she revealed to me. This is not a bracelet, so let me disassemble this. This is not a bracelet. This is 3 elastic ties that run together that I have just kind of wrapped one around the other, as she did, to make this really wonderful bracelet. I asked her where she got them. She was very generous in supplying the information. She got them at Walmart, so I made a beeline to Walmart to get these 3 individual, what are these called, you guys? They're not scrunchies, hair ties, whatever. But I just love them, and I love the fact that you can kind of put them together any way that you like. And then I just layered them with some other just elastic bracelets that I have, and they can look really elegant. They can look kind of boho chic, and of course I just have lots of these inexpensive bangles that comes together for a really pretty ensemble. Don't look at my owie, but a really pretty ensemble. This ring I got in Amelia Island. My sister and I both bought one simultaneously so that when we put it on we can think of each other. And yes, I actually do have a manicure because Stuart and I did tons of QVC last week and my previous manicure had just been destroyed. My little belt, by the way, I'm going to ask you guys a question. I really like colorful belts, little belts like this, preferably in leather, and I'm having trouble finding some. I would really like a really good red leather belt. If you guys have any ideas for where I could source those, please let me know. This is an orange one and I really like it. My breeches are from H&M and they were a gift to me from my daughter-in-law and son at Christmas time. And my booties, I think these came from Nordstrom Rack. I can't really remember. I've had them for years. I do have a question of the day for you guys on this outfit du jour, and that is, again, no right answer, no wrong answer. I am just curious about what your feelings are on them. But my mother-in-law really did not like it when we gals would wear ripped jeans, and maybe especially if you were an older gal like me, she just kind of didn't think it was appropriate, maybe not ladylike. And I know there's a whole different theory about that. I am somebody that I just kind of like it. I like the texture of it, and I like the additional little, again, textural element, I guess, that it gives to a pair of breeches. But again, there's no right or wrong answer. I am just curious, do you guys wear jeans that have tears in them? And if you do you think that there should be an age cutoff for that? If at a certain point we're too old to wear them, or if they're just something that should be relegated to the young? I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that. Stuart is laughing. Is laughing at me. So there you go. There is your outfit question of the day and your outfit du jour.